And I hope as everybody's coming in that they are ready to see some colorful vegetables and make some delicious food. And if you're joining us today, I hope you are excited, but I also am curious to know where you guys are all located. So if you want to drop a little note and tell us where you are, it's fun to see how far and wide everybody's coming together to learn to cook today. I'm really excited to be showing you one of my favorite foods. And this is Let Fancy Food Be Thy Medicine. And I want to thank Farm Animal Rights Movement for having me on today. This is a really exciting webinar series, and I'm really honored to be included. Thank you guys again. What a great cause. I am Chef Suzi, author of Plant-Based Gourmet. And as the name suggests, it is a big, beautiful cookbook full of lots and lots and lots of recipes for the gourmet in you. Some of them difficult, some of them very simple, and some of which I hope to make seem a lot more simple for you today. What we're going to be making is an eggless frittata, which is one of my absolute favorite things because as a chef, I really love eggs, but I don't eat eggs anymore because I'm vegan. I'm sure you guys can relate. So for me, the goal is to combine the culinary desire for eggs with a planet-saving, animal-saving choice. And as a nutritionist, I love using beans. So today we're going to be going through a bean version. So I'm really excited to be showing that with you guys today because this is going to be a gluten-free, egg-free, soy-free, from scratch frittata that you can easily make yourself at home in probably between 15 to 30 minutes. So I've got everything all laid out here for us today, and I'm looking forward to going through all of that with you. We're going to wait a couple more minutes for people to join with us, but I'm just so grateful to have you here with us in preparation for the Mother's Day celebrations that you might have this weekend. I like to say that it's in honor of mothers of all species. And this Sunday being Mother's Day and tomorrow being Cinco de Mayo, I thought that it would be nice to do a festive themed one. So today, in addition to doing the vegan frittata, we're going to be covering it with one of my absolute favorite things and one of my mother's absolute favorite things, mole sauce. So I'm going to take you through a nice little mole to put on top of a Mexican flavored frittata. And I'm really excited to show it to you today. You can find the recipe for my mole sauce in my book. I think it's on page 130. And joining me here today is Frances Gordon from Apollo Publishers, the amazing place that published my book. Say hi, Frances.
Hey, everyone. I'll be here, voice to support Suzi, and I'll be answering questions or telling Suzi the questions in the Q&A. So I'm around. Suzi, I can just jump in. We've already gotten a few comments. We have people coming from Maria from Sacramento, Julie from Ohio, Shamira from Colorado. So yeah, we're represented all over.
That's a lot. It's so exciting that all these people that I've never met from all over are coming together because of their love for fancy vegan food, which is going to be fancy, but not so fancy, right? I'm going to hopefully demystify some of the magic behind plant-based gourmet food, because as you can see, it's all ingredients that you probably know or have, not expensive stuff. And honestly, the difference between gourmet and not gourmet is usually just a couple extra spices thrown in there, if I'm totally honest with you. So I really hope you guys all over the place, wherever you're joining from, find an excuse to make some fancy vegan food for yourselves later.
So I'm just going to drop in a link to where anyone who's interested can buy this beautiful cookbook.
This is truly a labor of love. Every one of these dishes, a big, bright, colorful picture, ranging from the complex to the simple, everything from making your own homemade butter to making fancy cakes and appetizers worthy of a restaurant. So I really do hope you guys pick up a copy and we show the world just how great vegan food can be. I know you already know it, but they need to know it too.
All right, Suzi, I think we are ready to go.
All right, it's rock and roll time. Thanks, Frances, and thanks again to to farm animal rights movement. This is Let Fancy Food Be Thy Medicine, and I'm Chef Suzi. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm really honored to be cooking with you guys today. And I want to run down all of these amazing little ingredients I have set up and ready for you. All of these, or most of these things, are going to go right into my Vitamix blender. You can use any blender to do this. You do not specifically need a high-speed blender, so that's fun. The star of today's show is the humble mung bean. Mung bean, also known as moong dal, comes in a couple different varieties. This is the split pea version of it. So the yellow one, not the green one. So get yourself over in a nice bulk store where you can order it in bulk and not waste a lot of extra plastic. Fill up a container just like this one. And then when you get it home, soak it in some water. I tell people that you got to soak it in water, warm water for 2 hours, or if you have the time to soak it for 6 hours or overnight, it can be any temperature. And then once it's been soaking, and I've had this soaking for a little while, you just drain it. Set it to drain. I'm going to rinse it. For all of you aquafaba fans out there, you know that what I'm rinsing away is the starch. I'll leave it up to you if you want to save that for later projects. And while that's draining, I'm going to talk about the rest of the ingredients I have right here. So, joining the mung beans, chickpea flour, one of my favorites to use. By the end of this, you'll notice that there are 3 legume foods going in here for a whopping 3 servings of heart-healthy, body-healthy legumes. If you're doing a daily dozen or anything like that, this recipe definitely has you covered. Now, aside from the mung beans, the true star of the show are going to be the Mexican seasonings that I use to flavor this festively for Cinco. Part of these are chipotle and paprika and hatch green chilies. And feel free to mix and match with things that you're more comfortable with, familiar with, or if you avoid spice, feel free to switch the paprika for a sweet paprika. If you can't find hatch green chili powder, then you can always substitute with more chipotle or just amp up the garlic and onion powder. In here, I've got, all the way around here, I've got turmeric for a little bit of color, smoked paprika, garlic powder, and I do prefer the roasted garlic powder. It gives it just a little extra something. Onion powder, chipotle powder, hatch green chili powder, and the star of every Eggy show, kala namak. Kala namak is Indian black salt. You might have heard about this before, but I thought you guys might want to see what it looks like in its whole form. They're crystalline black rock salt that come from India, and I actually did get this in India, and I actually grind it myself, but you can usually find it in any sort of spice dispenser that you might find at your local health food store or maybe Whole Foods. And of course, you can buy it online. So together, those make the spices. I also am using a plant milk today. This happens to be oat milk. Oat milk is my preferred cooking milk. However, this recipe also tastes very good with a nice, creamy coconut milk. And if you prefer coconut milk, feel free to use coconut milk. But when you do that, you're going to tone down the olive oil, which is also going into it. So we've covered the spices, the mung beans, the chickpeas, the oil, and the milk. I think we're ready to start adding these to a blender. Into the blender goes the milk, the mung beans, and I do like to scrape every last little one in here. The spices.
So Suzi, why is oat milk your preferred cooking milk?
So, you know, that's a good question. I think oat milk is sort of like a powerhouse of plant milks. It's very versatile. You can make it as fatty or as not fatty as you want. I have a great recipe to make oat milk from scratch in my book, which I encourage you all to try because it is cheaper than dirt when you make it yourself. And you can add or subtract any flavoring that you want. I tend to like oat milk because it's really neutral. It's very creamy and it adds body to things without bringing in a lot of other like gelling agents or gumming agents or thickeners and things, which it doesn't need because of its high starch content. It's nice and thick as it is. So into the mixture, I'm also going to add the chickpea flour. And some olive oil. I would be lying to you if I told you that I always measure, but this recipe does use 3 tablespoons of olive oil if not using the coconut milk, and usually about 2 otherwise. If you're skipping the oil because you don't like it or you're avoiding it for your own reasons, you can always substitute with more coconut milk instead and have it be a completely unprocessed food.
Susie, I did notice the stove, it looks like it's on. Is that?
Yes, I am heating up my cast iron so that it's ready to rock and roll for us.
Perfect.
So in the background, I have my oven set to 375 and I have my cast iron now at a nice high temperature, covering it with more oil so that it's ready to go for us. That's just a little bit of steam coming off of it because I do use water when I'm heating it up to start with, which is a really good trick. So this is going to be loud as I blend. I'm just going to bring this over here for you guys to see. It needs to be a pourable texture, a little bit of wobble, not unlike a pancake batter. And that's what I do call this. I call this a batter. So once you have this, the nice texture, let me see if I can drip it for you to see. It's still a little bit chunky, so I'm going to blend it a little bit more. All right. Nice and smooth now. You want to avoid it getting too bubbly, too aerated, but you do want it to be nice and sort of thick so that when you're like stirring it with a spoon like this, you see how it stays on the spoon, but it's thick and drippy like that. That's the perfect consistency, much like a pancake batter. So now let's talk through the rest of the stuff on this display. So what I've got here is about 3/4 of a cup to a cup of black beans and sweet corn. I've got some chopped herbs, cilantro, chive, and Mexican oregano. You can substitute Italian or Mediterranean oregano if you can't find the Mexican oregano, but if you can find it, I highly recommend it. And if you don't like the cilantro, feel free to omit it or substitute it with something else like marjoram or thyme if you prefer those flavors. I also have some vegan cotija here, which is like a crumbly feta cheese. I do have a recipe for a good crumbly feta in the book, but I also really happen to love the Follow Your Heart and other brands of store-bought vegan feta cheeses. The drier, the better, because you really want it to be crumbly. And this one, as you can see, is nice and powdery crumbly. I also have some thinly sliced red onions, some cherry tomatoes. And I cannot stress enough, if you ever see cherry tomatoes still on the vine, highly recommend. The flavor is about 10 times more intense and delicious. And I also have, in honor of Cinco, some extra little corn fun. I really like to blacken roasted corn. And I'm going to use that as sort of like half garnish, half additional corn in the recipe. And what you do is you roast the corn, or if you want to save time, throw it in the microwave for a little bit, and then you just blacken it right on your stove or in a cast iron skillet pan. So here we've got a knife, and you're just going to go all the way down just like you were cutting it. And I like when I get these nice chunky pieces and also these little blackened pieces to spread around too. It's a nice variety of texture and color for the top of your frittatas. And I'm just going to go and cut through all of this so that it's ready to go. All right. Move all of these things off. We'll come back for this stuff later. So all of this stuff, as you might have guessed, is going to go on top of the frittata while it's cooking. So without further ado, I'm going to head over to the oven to show you what we've got going on top of that stove. Pardon me while we walk over and set up.
So anyone who would like to, we are having a raffle for a copy of Suzi's cookbook. So please go ahead and enter a question in the Q&A, and yeah, we're really excited. That'll be at the end of the event, so hang out.
So I'm bringing this all the way over here so that it's next to me while I'm working with my wet batter. And now you can see why that stove was on, because I need to make sure that the cast iron and the oil on top of it are hot enough to cook with when it's time to pour my batter in. The way that you test to see if it's hot enough is if the water dances. This is how you find out if the water is dancing. Pretty festive, huh? Perfect for our frittatas. Now that I know that the temperature is right, I can go ahead and pour my batter in. And one of the things that I like to do is, now that I've taken the blender off of the blades, I can put my solid ingredients in, like the corn and black beans and the herbs, to help them evenly disperse as I pour them out. Turning the heat down on it a little bit now. It was at medium to get it ready. Now it's sort of like medium low. And I'm just pouring it straight away in, taking a spatula and scooping it out. And you can hear that sizzle, which is like music to my ears. Mixing it around. And while it's sizzling away, this is when we decorate with our red onions. And you can make this as beautiful as you want, as quick as you want. I like to load it up with all my favorite goodies here. Tomatoes. I do like to put the cut side up. And you can see as we're going along, these edges are starting to set, which is great.
Suzi, you could arrange, if anybody wanted to, they could arrange the onions in like a circle to make it look like a work of art or something.
Yeah, get as fancy and creative with this as you want. Just remember that the clock is ticking. You want to get this into the oven before it sets all of the way. So I am just going through and decorating it. And now my cotija. Yummy crumbly cheese.
And so where did you say people can find some cotija vegan cheese?
So you can make the vegan feta from the book. The book is Plant-Based Gourmet by me, Chef Suzi. Or I do especially love the Follow Your Heart brand feta. It makes a perfect cotija. And then straight from the stove into the oven. And that's going to bake for about 10 minutes. We're going to check on it in 10 minutes. And I'm going to turn this flame off for just 1 second so that I don't burn my hair off. And while that happens, I'm going to set us up for mole. Switching gears here, I'm going to heat this guy up over a low medium heat because of the size of this. I'm going to put a little bit of butter. You can find the butter recipe in my book as well. Making your own butter is such a treat. You can really control what goes into it. However, if you don't have time or interest to do that, there are some incredible vegan butters out on the market. I am particularly partial to Miyoko's, but every day I feel like there's a new vegan butter out on the market. Easier and easier to go plant-based and plant-based gourmet every single day. So while that butter is melting, I'm going to bring over my mole paste. You can find the recipe for the mole paste in my book on page 130. And it's a range of spices that you probably already have, like chocolate and sesame. And I really encourage you to check it out. But if you don't want to make it from scratch, there are two really excellent mole sauces that are available on the market. La Doña. This is like everybody who grew up eating mole knows La Doña.
Can you hold that a little closer so we can see?
La
Oh,
Doña.
thank you. Perfect.
And just the other day, I found this incredible mole sauce at Wegmans, which is really great if spice is not your friend. So now that my butter is browned and warm, I'm going to pour in my mole paste. I'm going to let that mix together a little bit. And as I'm stirring it, I'm going to add about 1/2 to 3/4 cup of water to thin it out. If spice is your friend, but not extreme spice, then you can always add more butter or you can add more water to thin it out more. Consequently, you can also add more spice to your mole or more mole paste to your sauce mix, depending on how thick or not thick you want it. And we're going to turn up the heat here and reduce it down just a little bit while we talk. And you can see it's creamy, it's dark. You can see some of the fat sort of accumulating on the surface of it. Nice, rich, deep, savory notes coming off of this. Someday they will make smell-o-vision, and that day would be a really great day indeed, because you can smell like how deep and rich these flavors are, and they really liven up absolutely everything. I like to put mole on obviously the frittata, but you can put mole on tofu, you can put mole on rice, you can put mole on just about anything, and it's delicious. So it's coming to a nice little fine boil here around the edges. All of this while our frittata is cooking away.
And how long does the frittata stay in the oven?
The total time for the frittata in the oven is about usually no more than 12 to 15 minutes. And that's nice because, you know, you saw how quickly you could just sort of throw everything together. And it goes right into the blender. And then you pour it into a pan and you heat it up for just a little bit long enough to decorate it. And then it goes straight into the oven for 12 minutes. And then it's pretty much ready. So it's a nice, quick, fast, easy thing, despite having a lot going on. You can see already how much thicker this is getting. So I'm just going to turn off the heat because it's ready to rock and roll. You can see it has some texture. It's not that runny anymore, despite putting in over 1/2 cup of water. Super good, delicious. So while this bakes, I must admit, we've got some magic of television for you here, guys. I'm going to put this back in my little tripod. And, oopsies. All right. Ooh, that's not working. Here we go. All right. I got locked out of my own. There we go. All right. Can you see me? Everything good?
Everything looks perfect.
Oh, great. Magic of television, folks. I made this for you guys last night just so that we could keep things moving along. We've got about 5 minutes left on that first 10-minute timer. And while we're waiting for that, I wanted to show you next steps. And next steps look like cutting into our delicious frittata. And of course, serving it. So you can see into it, delicious frittata. I love cast iron cooking because everything is always so delicious. It brings extra flavor. It adds actual dietary iron into the food that you're eating. And it just makes things just warm and homey. Even the heft of it makes me feel happier when I cook with it. So, got my mole sauce. This is my pre-made stuff, but here's the fresh stuff that I just made with you. You can see it's still steaming and hot, delicious. Take any old spoon, and you can do this fancy, or you can do this sloppy. You can smother it. You can decorate with it. Just cover it in that mole until you're sure that it's enough mole to make your mouth and your heart happy. And this is absolutely one of my mother's favorite foods. We ate mole growing up very, very, very often. And I know she's coming to visit me this weekend and she's going to be so excited to eat mole. And she loves my vegan frittatas too. And otherwise, to garnish, what we have here are some pepitas, which are pumpkin seeds, roasted pumpkin seeds. I consider pumpkin seeds to be one of the most nutritious foods that you could possibly eat. Sesame seeds are traditional when serving mole. They're in the sauce, and now they're also on the sauce. And I think they look just so beautiful on there. And you might have guessed, I can never get enough of this cotija. So here's some more of that delicious crumbly cotija. And if you're of the mindset that you eat as much with your eyes as you do with your mouth and your stomach, you can dress it up as fancy as you like. And there is our fancy, eggless, gluten-free, soy-free, Cinco de Mayo themed Mother's Day brunch frittata.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Susie. So something I was thinking about is, do you have any tips and tricks for how to pour sauce artfully or make it look so professional as you've done?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing to think about is your spoon, anatomy of a spoon. So the spoon that I used, I'm just gonna shamelessly lick this mole sauce, like, excuse me. Big old soup spoon. That gave me some big, rich globs. The heft and weight of a spoon is what lets you do those like really fancy like plate drawings when you're like, oh, I'm gonna decorate my plate like this, and then I'm gonna do a swoosh because I'm a fancy restaurant and I'm making it swooshy. You need a heavy, hefty spoon for that. The other thing I want to alert you to, other than size, is the shape of the end of the spoon. So you can see this giant spoon, which I call my avocado scooping spoon, has sort of a narrow point at the end. This little guy also has a narrow point at the end. This guy has a big, wide edge. This guy is a, get a lot of sauce on their spoon. This is a control very small amounts. Maybe you want fine little dollops of that sauce. Like I'm gonna draw dots on the edge of this plate with this fine little spoon, right? Little dots. And if you're using a thinner sauce, you can get finer lines with something that goes really pointy. And in fact, they even make special fancy chef spoons that come to a very fine point and maybe even have like a little funnel off of the end if you really want to draw fine lines with things. People also use brushes and spatulas to get a lot of these effects as well. But if I was plating this, I might do something like, okay, here's some more cilantro. There's my timer. I'm going to show you guys what the oven looks like. Decorate this guy with some little sesame seeds, and then I would garnish the side of the plate like that. So you guys want to see what's going on in that oven?
Let's do it.
All right. So in this oven, we've got a mostly done frittata. You can see what it looks like now. Nice and big and plump, but it still needs a couple more minutes. So back into the oven it goes for probably another 3 minutes, it looked like to my eyes. What you're looking for is for a slight golden edge And you can see on the one that I made before, it starts to reject slightly from the edge of the pan. When it's pulling away like that, you know it's done. All right. Should I try it?
Yeah, you got to.
All right.
What's the verdict?
And the verdict is that rich mole with this sort of creamy, eggy frittata, the crunch from the pepita, the cilantro, a little bit of heat from that mole sauce. Chef's kiss, literally chef's kiss, delicious. But I mean, it's hard to go wrong with a good mole because it can make white rice taste like the greatest thing you've ever had, truly. Do we have any questions or anything in the Q&A? If you have questions, now's a good time to add them there.
Yeah, so we've got a few questions.
Awesome.
From Julie, if you don't have a cast iron pan, can you use a regular skillet?
Yeah, great question. I encourage you to get a cast iron pan. However, if you don't have one or space for it or your own reasons, you can make the same one in anything that goes from stovetop to oven. That's the key. Alternatively, if you don't have something that can do both, you can skip the saute step and put it directly into something that's like a brownie tin, well oiled and greased, straight into the oven and bake it there and keep an eye on it to make sure that it rejects at the edges. It won't be quite as perfect around the edges because the high heat of that skillet on the stovetop really makes that, I'll show you, really makes the bottom of this hold together really well. Can you guys see underneath there?
Oh yeah, wow. That
Yeah, it's really really good effect from the high heat of the cast iron. But anything that goes from stove to oven will work. And failing that, you can definitely get very, very, very close, maybe all the way in something like a brownie pan.
Okay, great. So how about for those of us who want to cook without oil or, yeah, will it stick? How does that work?
Yeah, so we're gonna check on this guy again.
So this kind of seemed like it came together pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's a real fast one.
You just have to have all the ingredients.
The magic of vegan cooking. Things are fast and easy. All right, this guy is ready to rock and roll. If you really have it together, this can be made in probably 15 to 20 minutes, speeding through it. And it's delicious. It smells so eggy because of the kala namak. It's truly magical.
So that's the secret ingredient.
My secret ingredient. The secret ingredient is really mung beans. Mung beans make a really excellent egg replacement, especially for stuff like this, where you're actually like eating whole egg foods like omelets and frittatas and quiches and stuff like that. It's actually the secret ingredient in a vegan egg product that you can buy at the store, but we can make it from scratch here ourselves, cheaper without plastic. So really exciting without the processing. For the question about oil, so whenever you're cooking without oil, the step one is you got to reduce the heat. So all that sizzle, all that high heat stuff, you got to tone it way down. You want to also use a non-stick pan, whatever non-stick surface that you're comfortable using instead. That's basically what the oil is doing for us in the pan, is it's acting as a non-stick coating. So yeah, those are really, if you're trying to avoid cooking with oil at all, that's how I would go about doing it. You can, of course, also sort of glaze pans with avocados or coconut butter, things like that, that are whole foods processed that still have that oily, fatty layer instead of a refined oil.
Okay, great. And we have a couple other questions. Can we use a sneak a bite in? Can we use a different flour if we don't want to use chickpea flour?
Absolutely. This would work very well with almond flour or rice flour. If you're substituting it with a traditional wheat flour, I would just reduce the amount of it a little bit. So for this one, trying to remember now offhand, we use 1/3 of a cup of chickpea flour. So I would use maybe like 1/4 cup of wheat flour. Really, you can gauge how much flour you need by the consistency. If it's really runny and kind of thin, you need to up the flour. If it's thick and sort of stodgy, you're going to want to add a little bit more plant milk.
Okay, great. And that kind of leads me to what you started to talk about, some of the nutritional value of the different ingredients. Is there anything else that you can share with us about the?
Yeah, I mean, the magic of the egg-free frittata is that eggs are probably, like eggs from an animal that I don't eat, are probably one of the least healthy things that you can eat. They're loaded with saturated fat, loaded with cholesterol. They add very little other nutrient density along for all of those negative things that they bring. So we like to think of eggs as sort of like a net negative health food, regardless of the ethics involved, which I don't consider eggs to be an ethical food product to eat. The good news is mung beans are none of those. No saturated fat, tons of fiber, a good source of protein, have none of the ethical implications, comes together very well, very inexpensive, really brings along a lot of potassium and a lot of B vitamins and a lot of other really beneficial things along for the ride. And that's the magic here, is it's wins all the way down. It's winning in flavor, it's winning in speed, it's winning in cost, it's winning in environmental effect, it's winning in health effect, and it's a huge win for the animals.
Great, thank you. We just have a couple other short questions here. What other veggies can you put in this frittata? Like, could you use bell peppers or other peppers? And what about vegan sour cream?
Oh, yes, 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 and yes. So the frittata is like, you want to think of it as the batter. Remember that batter that we put together first? And I showed you the spices that I put in. Now, let's say you wanted to do this like an Italian one. Then instead of all of those spices that we put in, you'd put in basil and rosemary and maybe some thyme. And then you could put in olives. You could put in definitely bell peppers. You could put in any ingredients that you want. It's really like a choose your own adventure kind of dish. The frittata base structurally stays the same, but instead of putting in, 3/4 of a cup to a cup of black beans and corn, you put in these other vegetables instead. Instead of putting in, the spicy pepper, the roasted peppers, the smoked peppers, you're putting in Mediterranean spices instead. It's really a very flexible medium for you. Absolutely.
Awesome. And then we just have one other question. Is there a substitute sauce you might suggest if anyone didn't like mole?
Yeah. I mean, if I was going to do a Mediterranean flavored one, you could definitely go with like a delicious marinara sauce. You could also do something like an Alfredo sauce if you want to really up that sort of creaminess factor. And I mean, when I think eggs and brunch, I definitely start thinking about the béarnaise, the hollandaise. Those things would definitely be welcome with this, depending on how you flavored it and what your taste preferences are. Absolutely. It's definitely choose your own adventure. For me, for Cinco, for my mom coming in, I like to think mole, it's delicious. Mother's Day and Cinco together is a perfect combination for me for mole. And mole is so great. I mean, when you talk about health benefits, cacao is another one of these incredible things that you can add that just adds so much nutritional benefit for you. Things like good cognitive function, metabolic function, really greatly influenced by things like cacao. And a lot of our other spices too. We sometimes discount the value of herbs and spices because they're sort of afterthoughts or they're just sort of flavorings, but they're actually usually calorie per calorie, some of the most nutrient dense things that you eat in a day.
Great. Thank you so much, Susie. That was all of our questions. Yeah, so I guess we can move on to the raffle. Thank you to everyone who entered your questions. And without further ado, Shamira Braka, you are the raffle winner. So
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, Shamira. We'll be in touch with you and we'll get your information. So thank you so much for joining. Susie, you're amazing.
You're amazing. Thank all of you guys. Those are some excellent questions. I'm so inspired that you guys are thinking through your eating and your cooking this much. I know you guys are all going to crush it out there.
All right. Well, I guess we are closing up now and wishing everyone a happy Mother's Day from Apollo Publishers and Farm. Yeah, thank you so much.
Happy Mother's Day from me. You can find me on Twitter or on Instagram at Chef Suzi Gerber. Please do pick up a copy of my book. And if you do get it and you make it, I hope to see pictures. And if you have any questions about anything in there, hit me up on Twitter, Instagram. I always love answering questions from people about the book, the recipes, or any cooking techniques. So I think I saw something in the chat fly by about will I be posting the recipe? I would be more than happy to share today's recipe with you guys. Absolutely. Stay tuned.
Yes, thank you. We'll be sharing the recipe with everyone. So don't worry, we'll follow up.